astrology, Jyotish Shastra, horoscope, Kundali, these things, where have they come from?
Wait, I thought astrology was Jyotish Shastra and horoscope was Kundali, and all of these are from our ancient texts like Ved, Puran, whatever.
Well, they're not necessarily the same thing, although we pretend like it is the same.
Oh.
So let's find out.
Okay.
So let's start with astrology and horoscope.
Okay.
A natal chart of a person is a card containing the positions of the sun, moon, and all the planets at the time of the birth of that person. And based on that, people make predictions about that person's life and what's going to happen in the near future.
Correct.
That is called a horoscope.
True.
And the study of natal charts and horoscopes and how to make these predictions is called astrology.
Correct. So you use the Kundali to make predictions using Jyotish Shastra. That is what has always been the case.
I'm talking about astrology and horoscope right now. We haven't come to Kundali and Jyotish Shastra. Those are different. We'll come to that later. So there are two primary ideas associated with this.
Okay.
First is, when you look up at the sky, there are 12 important constellations. Right?
Yes.
This is like Taurus, the bull, Capricorn, the goat, and
Yeah.
so on. Okay. Now, each of these constellations is associated with certain personality styles. Okay. Libra will always be balanced and stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Please. Okay. Yeah.
Now, when you were born,
Huh.
exactly one of those constellations would be at the
Eastern horizon. Correct.
That's your first house.
Okay.
And the personality of that constellation decides what will be your personality, what your self is like.
Okay.
The second constellation up there is the second house. And that personality will decide how much wealth you will have, what your possessions will be like, and so on.
Okay.
The third one
Huh.
is associated with communication, siblings, short journeys, early education. So the personality of that constellation decides all these things in your life, right? And they gave 12 houses, 12 different personalities.
Okay. We are getting a primer to astrology here. Please do not use it as a way to learn astrology. We are trying to debunk astrology.
So this is astrology and horoscope. Okay. This started with the Babylonians, moved to the Jews in Egypt, and then to the Greeks.
Okay.
In parallel, in India, Jyotish Shastra was developing. Okay. So around 1400 BC or 1200 BC, somewhere around that time, we used Jyotish Shastra was the science of figuring out dates and times and the calendar.
Like how?
Right? Just by looking at the phases of the moon and the position of the sun in the different constellations. Right?
Okay.
Now, notice these are not the same constellations as the zodiac. Okay?
Yeah.
We used nakshatras, which are like 27 of them.
Correct.
Or 28, depending on which text you read.
Let's assume 27 for now.
Yeah. So, our astronomers, I'm going to call them astronomers, came up with rules of how to figure out the time of the year based on the positions of the sun, moon, and the nakshatras.
Correct.
Right?
But essentially the same concept as the constellations of the zodiac?
Except we were using it to figure out things like agriculture, right? When to sow seeds, when to harvest, right? That's fairly important to be able to predict when we have rainy season. For us, we are a monsoon country unlike the others. So for us, it was fairly important.
Correct.
So Jyotish Shastra in those days was basically our calendar. We even had things like, if a month is just based on the moon, then you have to add an extra month every 3 or 4 years.
Correct.
When to do that.
I think it's called the concept of Adhik Mas.
Yes. Plus, every once in a while, tithis, which are the days, right? You have to skip one day so that you are in sync with the moon, right? All of this they did. So, calendaring was Jyotish Shastra. Okay. And the rishis gave us rules on how to use all of this to decide various things related to agriculture.
Right.
Soon, people started asking for more. Right?
Like what?
Like what? As in, I'm going on a journey. When should I start? And the rishi comes and says, avoid Amavasya. Right? Why do you want to avoid Amavasya? Because there is no moon in the sky. It is going to be dark. And if you are out in the darkness, it is much more dangerous. Predators and hostile people.
Correct. In the darkness of the night.
We got some more fine-grained rules. Right? But ye dil mange more. So people clamored for even more rules. And then they started making up rules.
Like what rules?
So they divided the day into 30 parts. Okay, there was no concept of hour back then.
Makes sense.
They divided the day into 30 parts. Each part is one muhurta, 48 minutes. Okay. And then they said 2 muhurta before sunrise is the Brahma muhurta. And that's a great muhurta to do your meditation, spiritual practice, studying.
Probably because there is nobody else awake at that time, so you have peace and quiet.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
It continues to make sense. So don't do things on an Amavasya.
Yeah.
Do your meditation and studies during Brahma Muhurta, makes sense. But this is a slippery slope, right? Then they came up with the idea of Abhijit Muhurta, midday.
Okay.
It is auspicious for starting an important task. Okay.
Why midday though? Won't you
Now-
want to start it earlier in the morning, like 9, 10 a.m. current time?
Now the connection with logic becomes a little tenuous, right? The way I imagine it is that if you want to start some task, you need some time in the morning to analyze it carefully, talk to people, get opinions and so on.
And prep probably.
Prep. And then you make the decision around midday so that you still have rest of the day to actually execute on that task.
So
right?
Abhijit Muhurta midday-ish to start tasks.
Right?
All right.
Vijay Muhurta is afternoon for victory in battle or competitions, right?
Afternoon.
Basic idea is that, throughout the day you are fighting. Now around the afternoon, you are close to winning, right?
Okay.
Now at this point, if you let the enemy go, this is from the time when battles used to stop at night.
Yeah,
Right?
I remember they used to blow a conch.
Correct.
And the battle used to stop at that point.
So next morning, the enemy is going to be all rested and rejuvenated. So if you want to press home your advantage and go in for the kill, then the Vijay Muhurta is a good time to do that. Right?
Yeah, just before the sun sets, give it your final push, win the battle and come home victorious. Vijay Bhava.
By the way, this is just kind of speculative. I'm just trying to guess the logic, right?
Yeah,
as you will see, as we go further, the logic reduces until a point where it just disappears, right?
Slippery slope, remember? Slippery
Because
slope.
other thing they used to do in those days, they started coming up with rules like, based on natural events like eclipses and meteors and comets and bird calls. Right?
Okay.
And you can imagine that sometime in the past there was some logic that if a bird starts making this kind of a noise, that means there is a predator, so don't do XYZ. If a bird makes that kind of a noise, it means something else, so you can do XYZ, right?
See, I know all of this that you're saying is speculative, but it makes so much sense.
Right. But all of this, right?
Yeah.
So omens based on nature,
started to emerge.
and muhurta and all of that, right?
Correct.
So this was Jyotish Shastra until around the 1st century AD.
All right.
Okay.
But now I'm wondering, where does the Kundali come into the picture?
Kundali did not exist.
What do you mean?
Around the 1st century AD, somebody brought in the concept of Greek astrology to India.
The one that you explained just before, where you had 12 houses.
Right. So in fact, there is a Sanskrit text called the Yavana Jataka, which explains all of this in detail.
Hold on. Yavana Jataka. If I remember some of my Sanskrit correctly, Yavana was used to refer to Greeks.
Correct. And Jataka is related to birth, right? That's where we get Jataka tales. They're tales related to birth of Buddha. Okay.
Oh.
So Yavana Jataka is the natal charts, the birth charts and horoscopes and birth related predictions coming from the Greeks.
Okay.
And as soon as that came, the people here saw the potential. Okay. And they immediately merged it with Jyotish Shastra. So now suddenly Jyotish Shastra, from being astronomy and calendar, has become a full-blown pseudoscience of prediction based on your birth.
Dude, I'm sure it would have trended on Product Hunt back in the day if Product Hunt was a thing.
Because think of the difference between the old Jyotish Shastra and astrology, right? Jyotish Shastra, it was not based on any planets, just sun, moon and nakshatra.
Yeah, it was basically a clock and a calendar.
Correct. It was not the 12 constellations of the zodiac, it was 27 nakshatra. And it was not person specific, right?
Yeah.
If Amavasya is a bad time, then it's a bad time for everybody, okay?
Yeah.
What astrology did was make it person specific depending on at the time of your birth where something was.
So basically, when you use the word astrology here, you're referring to modern astrology, which is essentially a merger of Greek astrology and what we knew as Jyotish Shastra, which was clock and calendar.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? Now that one has become person specific because of the Greek influence. Okay. And that uses 12 constellations, which are the Rashi.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So nakshatra is our old 27 constellations. Rashi is the 12 constellations that we got from the Greeks. That is why Rashi has exactly the same meanings in Greek and Indian, right? So Meena is fish, it is Pisces in Greek.
Yeah, I was just thinking that Mesha is the ram,
which is
Aries.
right, and so on. So
Vrishabha, Bull.
it's basically a translation which happened around the 1st century AD.
Oh.
Historically, if you look closely, you will find that before that point, we really didn't use the planets for doing much of our calendaring or our predictions or our omens. Planets have come in after the Greeks.
Okay, so we use the concept of the night sky, the firmament, to do clock and calendaring. The Greeks use the same night sky firmament to do omens and predictions, speculations
Yes.
of sort. But why would the Greeks look at the night sky and think predictions? Where did all of this come in?
So this comes from the Babylonians. Okay, at that time, kings used to have these soothsayers who are like witch doctors but with better status.
Okay.
And the soothsayers were expected to predict the future and is this a good time to do this? Is this a good time to go to war?
Yeah.
And they started using the positions of the zodiac
Yeah.
to make predictions, right?
Yeah, because they were literally the heavens and what the heavens said mattered. So you basically started.
In general,
yeah.
humans are excellent at finding random patterns, right? And making sense out of them. Okay. So that's why some people read tea leaves and come up with predictions. Other people look at cards in tarot and come up with predictions, right? So this is in the same category. Okay. Later, the Greeks took this idea, they loved it, and they completely expanded on it, right? So instead of just applying to kings and countries, they started applying it to individuals based on the birth of that individual.
And that's how each part of the night sky became a house of certain specificity, a certain aspect of life, and then the sun, the moon, the planets in those houses would affect. Oh, wow. Okay.
Exactly, right? And this is such a lovely system, right?
Yeah.
So this particular zodiac is your third house, right? Which means it relates to your siblings and how you communicate. So now if Saturn is in there and Saturn is the king of obstacles and delays, it means that there are going to be obstacles in your relationship and communication with your siblings. Such a lovely, systematic, logical structure.
I object to the word systematic and logic in there because a lot of it is just out of nothing.
See,
but yeah.
Once you accept the axioms at the bottom, the rest of it is very logical, right?
Yeah, but the axioms at the bottom are floating in thin air. They don't have any foundation.
Well, so this is in the days when there was no concept of RCTs and trying to do a study of whether this really works or not. And as long as there is a logic which is delivered with confidence, humans will twist themselves to make it true, right? That's what the placebo effect is. That's what wishful thinking is. If someone tells you that, tomorrow you are going to have success in your romantic life, that makes you more confident.
Affirmations.
That makes you go out and ask more girls out, right? And then you end up succeeding. Self-fulfilling prophecies. That's why astrology works.
All right. Perfect. Let's come back to our basic topic of question, which is the Greeks gave us this concept, which we then merged with our Jyotish Shastra, which was clock and calendaring, and then created the Kundali.
Kundali means coil or a circle. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So the 12 zodiacs which are in a circle around the sky, those are the Kundali.
Okay,
right?
So you form your Kundali with the 12 zodiacs and now you have the 12 houses and then you figure out the planets and put them into those houses.
Exactly.
Wow. So the Kundali that we have is actually Greek in origin.
So we started using this to do further illogical predictions of our own. Right?
Ouch.
I already said that Saturn is associated with delays and obstacles.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
No.
Saturn, Shani, is the planet which moves the slowest in the sky.
Ah.
Okay, so that's why it got associated with slow.
Yeah.
Shant and Shani have the same root. Okay, and that
This actually blew my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that is why slowness then became obstacles, and that's why Shani landing up anywhere is going to cause problems.
Okay.
The other cool thing is Rahu, which is chaos, and
Yeah.
Ketu, which is spirituality and detachment.
Okay. I have heard of Rahu and Ketu. I didn't know they were chaos and spirituality and detachment. Where did they come from?
I was always very confused about why did our ancients come up with these two non-existent planets.
Yeah.
Right? Only when doing research for this episode, I found out, and it's a brilliant concept. Okay.
Okay.
We already talked about the ecliptic, right?
Yes.
The line sun draws across the sky over the course of a year.
Correct.
Similarly, moon also has an orbit. So moon also draws a line across the sky over the course of the year.
Okay.
Except that it's not identical to the sun. Okay.
Yeah.
The two circles are at 5 degrees to each other. So
they'll-
they will intersect in 2 points.
Correct.
Not just that, but the moon's circle is also rotating like this. So the points of intersection shift.
Oh.
And that shifting isn't happening over a period of a year, it's happening over the period of 18 years. Right?
Oh, okay.
So the 2 points where the moon's orbit intersects the sun's ecliptic are called Rahu and Ketu. Okay?
Oh.
Because when the moon is actually at the north intersection point, Rahu, that is the only time that you get eclipses.
Oh.
Right? Obviously, because if
Right.
the moon and sun are a little off, then you're not going to get an eclipse. Only when they coincide, you are going to get an eclipse.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Like a total solar eclipse.
Just think about it, right? A solar eclipse is associated with chaos, right?
Yeah.
People would get wild, people would go nuts, and all kinds of horrible things were associated with eclipses. So obviously, if chaos eclipse happens when moon reaches Rahu, so obviously Rahu is the planet or god of chaos.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the other intersection point, the southern end, right? When the moon reaches there, you get a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse happens at night, and you can still kind of see a reddish moon, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't cause people to go nuts, right? In fact, you feel calm and relaxed, right?
Yeah.
But you know,
It's
things
also
are
prettier
different.
to watch.
And things are different. So
Yeah.
that is why Ketu is associated with spirituality and detachment, right?
Ah,
So you
okay.
can see how Shani, Saturn, is associated with obstacles, Rahu with chaos, and Ketu with spirituality.
Okay.
That's where you get this logic from.
That also explains how our ancestors had 9 planets, because they didn't know about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but they knew about Buddha, Shukra, Mangal, Guru, and Shani, which are the 5 planets that they knew. And then there was, of course, the Sun, Moon, Rahu, and Ketu. So that
Correct.
made 9.
Exactly. Navagraha is those,
Yeah.
including the 2 intersection points.
Interesting. Okay. So all of this sounds like we imported a bunch of BS from the Greeks and put it on a very nice clock and calendaring system and ruined it completely.
Yeah. Well, I like to think about why did such a system start and thrive, and
Okay.
it's still around, right?
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of good reasons for the bullshit to work, right? Very simple is for political strategy,
Huh.
right? If you have to make decisions and somebody comes up with a bunch of rules saying, this is it, decision is made for you, then it's so much easier to convince the populace that, oh, there is a rule, my hands are tied, that is why I have to increase taxes.
Shani is in the 5th house of whatever, I have to increase
Exactly.
taxes.
Right? Also, social coordination becomes easier. If everybody is arguing, somebody is saying that let's do it tomorrow, somebody is saying do it on Monday, and there is just a rule saying do it on Thursday, and then everybody has to do it on Thursday. It
Upwas
improves
on
coordination, right?
Upwas on Mondays.
Exactly. Also, it sort of makes you feel good. That makes you feel that the God, the universe, is taking an interest in your affairs and that's why good things will happen to you, right? So Puri Kainat will help you in your quest tomorrow, right?
Very Shah Rukh of him.
But the most important is that this also helped with preserving of knowledge, right?
Okay.
Complex calculations that were required to figure out the muhurtas and the agricultural decisions and so on, right?
Yeah.
Were memorized by people because they wanted to do all of this astrology stuff, right?
Ah.
So you get many more people who are capable of doing these calculations.
So in a way, it helped pass on knowledge of the ancients in terms of the clock and calendaring that we spoke about through a weird system of BS infused knowledge.
Absolutely. But to understand how astrology fools people, and even today so many people believe that it actually works, check out our episode on the Barnum effect.
Yeah. The Barnum effect is something that will blow your mind once you watch the first 5 minutes of the video, because we have said some really interesting truths about you. I'm not kidding, actually about you. So go check that out. Meanwhile, I will digest this entire new knowledge about astrology, Jyotish Shastra, horoscope, Kundali, and how all of them are same but different in my own way. Shrikant, Naveen, Future IQ.